Welcome. This is David Boles, Human Meme. Today's topic, not missing Richard Simmons. Not too very long ago, there was a 6-episode podcast called Missing Richard Simmons, an odd but rare beast of a series that pretended to have a concern for Richard Simmons, but was really only a mangled attempt at a noble sloka. Sloka, S-L-O-K-A. A sloka for the attention-seeking podcaster, not me, hoping to ride the tale of rediscovery in forcing Richard Simmons back out into the real world of life for examination and retribution. What does it say about us that for 6 episodes, Missing Richard Simmons was the #1 podcast on iTunes? Does it say that we care about Richard Simmons? Or does it say that we're merely dying for more gossip on Richard Simmons? And, in case you don't know, Richard Simmons was a child star on stage and in the movies, and he was fat and overweight. And then, as an adult, he lost a lot of weight and inspired others to do the same. Richard Simmons was probably the first and best exercise guru to make 100 fortunes selling the hopelessness of a better body to an obese America. And for the past few years, Richard Simmons has been out of the public eye. Is he retired? Some wonder why he's gone and where he is. But we should really not care. Other than caring that we can only know what is shared with us, and only Richard Simmons knows the real reason for his removal from the public square. But that doesn't mean others aren't sure enough for him. And now the bigger questions loom above us. Do we still enjoy any sense of a right to privacy? Do we have a right to be left alone? I think perhaps not. When you make the dire choice to lead a public life and become a public figure, you ask for the public to believe in you, and they put their money and faith in your pocket, and they trust what you say, and you cannot run away from that adventure of commitment. As Willie Loman says in the play Death of a Salesman, you can't eat the orange and throw the peel away. A man is not a piece of fruit. And I say it's the same thing for your customers, the believers you bred and bled, and you are not allowed to walk away from them without explanation. So yes, Richard Simmons can try to walk away and put up a barrier and pretend none of his life happened. But he should expect the blowback that he's getting. People miss him. People who paid him own a piece of him. Richard Simmons asked to be liked, and he was. And that's why people, his fans, people who love him, will try to smoke him out of hiding. And Richard Simmons will be the topic of the same media whores he previously courted and quoted for attention. And on a similar but more serious note, in the same bloody vein, I have written a lot about Dr. Drew and his celebrity rehab television show that was broadcast for a while. And please go to bolesblogs.com and do a search for Dr. Drew, and you can find my previous missives. In short, I find it unconscionable that a doctor, Dr. Drew, a real medical doctor, tried to do a rehab television show where the stars of the show are actual patients, and they are actually addicted, and they are actually in such a bad state of mind that they demand a doctor's care. Dr. Drew's care. And I've never understood how Dr. Drew could get a legal, proper release form signed by an addicted, mentally and emotionally unstable person, or even by a management proxy, to get people to split their lives open for a television show. because no rational or sane person would ever want that sort of open display of hostility to the self to be memorialized forever on television. But Celebrity Rehab, Dr. Drew's Celebrity Rehab, was a television series, and Dr. Drew did his best on the show to help his patients. And the problems for Dr. Drew began after the TV series ended. Just because a series stops filming doesn't mean the story is finished or the addicts are rehabilitated at all, let alone forever. Far from it. Oh no, some of Dr. Drew's celebrity darlings who were famous enough, fodder enough, to appear on his show continued to have issues with alcohol and medication addiction long after his show stopped rolling. And not all of Dr. Drew's patients fell into trouble. He had some successes. But enough of his former patients did have trouble, and some of them even died. Yes, they died. And when the matters of aftercare were addressed, and Dr. Drew publicly and vehemently defended himself that his TV patients were no longer his real-life patients or his concern, and that he had finished with them a long time ago, it all rang false. Because on television, everything is forever. And what all of Dr. Drew argued was logically true. I argue today still that Dr. Drew always had a higher calling and responsibility, that he must morally be held to a bit of a higher standard, because he alone set himself up to use the personal lives of his celebrities to enhance the bottom line. And Dr. Drew certainly profited from his television show. Of course, monetarily, and with added fame to his own reputation. And I find it dismaying that Dr. Drew appeared to have used his patients and then threw them away. So how long is too long? When it comes to episodic television and the responsibility of a TV doctor-patient relationship in context, what do we do? I understand Dr. Drew wants a statute of limitations placed on him and his patient interaction. But here's the problematic catch. On TV, and in reruns and in the rewatching of saved episodes, those doctor-patient relationships are always renewed and fresh. The covenant that was first created between doctor and patient even years ago fills an endless loop where every day is the first day, and the last episode always wraps around again to become the first. And so Dr. Drew believes he is done. I think he's only done upon his death. But we, the watchers, are not done, and we demand that Dr. Drew continue to interact with his patients forever, into eternity. Because that's how television works in reruns and in memory. And because that's how Dr. Drew set himself up in the series as the tough but thoughtful and loving caregiver. And you can't stop caring when the series ends and still expect to hold on to the nature of your good name. And Dr. Drew has said many times he's done with celebrity rehab and that he's off the clock, but he knows he really isn't done and never will be. And even his co-star advocate on the show now admits, on the record and in retrospect, that the whole silly notion of trying to treat serious addiction on episodic television was a bad idea. And you can admire a man who admits error and accepts defeat. And our Dr. Drew could learn a lot in a similar absolution and admission to try to help soften the tough line he's taken against the end merits of his own show. So how does all this Dr. Drew nonsense wrap around and turn back into the matter of privacy for public figures? Well, a lot like Richard Simmons, Dr. Drew pretty much wants to be left alone. Dr. Drew did his job, he believes, in a limited context, and he wants out from under the implied promise he initially made to us when he begged our time and our interest in order to become viewers of his show. Hey, it's easy to start and hard to stop. Just ask Dr. Drew's celebrity rehab patients. And you cannot just get up from the table and walk away with unclean hands and expect not to leave a few marks behind you. We see the orange rind in your pocket. A man is not a piece of fruit to be eaten and then thrown away. Residue always clings, and residue is always sticky. And memory and reruns always play a powerful part in the assimilation of love and expectation from those who ask us to place our fragile faith in the brittleness of their lossless vessels. We have no right to privacy or escape. We are our deeds. We have become our public records. We are totally exposed in the wind, and we're sopping wet. Some of us have been digitized and scrutinized since birth. Celebrated on Facebook and photographed and videoed by our own family members, until there's nothing left of us but a shell without content. And a person without content is a person without context. That's the definition of the real Walking Dead. Only the body survives. The richness of a private moment is gone forever. Then there are some of us, the older of us, who were lucky enough to be born in the time of the black and white photograph, chemically processed, also in the age of the Polaroid camera. And we, the undersigned unforsaken, have witnessed the dawn of a new complexity of living as paper fades and fails and ink dies. And the virtual and the non-tenable are held in our heads and never not in our hands. We were lucky enough to spend a childhood lost in the woods or wandering on a beach, alone, without any pre-processors or megapixels tracking the every inch of us for exposure. And so the good of us, the us of us, were left alone to dream and to wonder and to want. And we knew if we waited to get out, we had to physically move our bodies to a new place and start all over again. And life is always about starting over, faster, better, stronger. But if you're of the generation born into virtuality, where the universe is at your intimate touch via smartphone, why would you ever want to leave where you've been found? Why would you ever want to stand up and walk across the room? Why would you ever want to get out of bed? And there's the problem. We have a generational conflict between expectation and execution of those who know what a promise means and those who make promises only because that's what's said in parallel and not really meant. Because, you see, to them, words do not need follow-through into actual verifiable result in the real human world, because nothing matters in their world except the wanting of the something. And so we are meant to suffer, alone and separately. But some of us have the luxury of knowing we've escaped who we were born to be, and that we do not have to be where we are from. And we also know if we ask someone else to follow us, like Richard Simmons and Dr. Drew did, well, we know what they do not. We know we are honor-bound to never ask anyone to stop following us, because we have given the power of that decision to the ones who have taken us up on our public word and our private offer. And we owe ourselves to them, our people, our fans, our followers, our patients, our friends, our clients, our dreams, and all of them, our believers, must have that safety of themselves in us in perpetuity, because that is the irrevocable covenant we made to continue forward, igniting a path that may lead us all astray, or we may stumble upon the right light. But together, as one, we will rise and fall into the outstretched arms of every entanglement. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.